The pawn shop owner asked me one question that made my entire body go numb. "Ma'am, did your daughter have permission to sell a white gold wedding ring engraved forever, Maggie? Love, Daniel." And I swear the glass slipped out of my hand before he even finished talking, because 48 hours earlier my daughter stood crying in my kitchen promising she would protect that ring with her life after I trusted her with the only thing my dead husband ever worked overtime for. And the worst part wasn't that she sold it, the worst part was because while I was racing across town thinking maybe she was desperate or in danger, the pawnbroker quietly told me she wasn't crying when she walked in, she was laughing. The last thing my husband Daniel ever touched before he died was that ring. I remember it clearly because his hands were trembling from the medication while he rolled the diamond slowly across my finger and whispered, "Promise me it stays in the family." 3 weeks later, I buried him wearing black gloves because looking down at my wedding band hurt too much. After 32 years together, silence became the loudest thing in my house. Every room carried pieces of him. His coffee mug beside the sink, his old work boots near the garage door, the country station he played every morning still saved on the kitchen radio. Some days I kept the television running just so the house wouldn't feel empty enough to swallow me whole. Emily started visiting more after the funeral. At first, I appreciated it. She brought groceries sometimes, helped organize paperwork, even stayed overnight when my grief got particularly ugly. One night she found me sitting alone at the kitchen table holding Daniel's ring box while crying into a cup of cold coffee. That was the first time she asked about the ring. "Dad always wanted me to have it someday," she said softly. I nodded because it was true. Daniel used to joke that the diamond was the only expensive thing he'd ever bought in his life. He worked double shifts at the steel plant for nearly 2 years just to afford it. Back then, we were surviving paycheck to paycheck with a newborn baby and a leaking roof. That ring represented sacrifice more than luxury, love more than money. A week later, Emily came over again looking exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking while she opened mail at my kitchen counter. I noticed red final notice stamped across one envelope before she flipped it upside down. She tried laughing it off, but eventually the truth spilled out. Credit card debt, past due rent. Collection agencies calling nonstop. She admitted she was drowning financially and too embarrassed to tell anyone. Then she looked at me with tears filling her eyes and said, "I just miss Dad. Everything fell apart after he died." That sentence broke me, because I missed him too. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt needed again. So I walked upstairs, opened my jewelry box, and brought down the velvet ring case Daniel gave me 32 years earlier. Emily immediately started crying the second she saw it. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe while promising over and over, "I'll protect this forever, Mom. I swear." And standing there in my kitchen holding my grieving daughter, I believed every single word she said. If you're still here with me, I want to know, would you have trusted your daughter with something that important? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe because after this, everything started falling apart fast. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was washing dishes after dinner. I almost ignored the number because I didn't recognize it, but something in my stomach tightened before I even answered. The man on the other end sounded hesitant. "Ma'am, My name's Victor. I own Brighton Pawn downtown. I think I need to ask you about a ring." The second he mentioned the engraving inside the band, my knees nearly gave out beneath me. "Forever, Maggie. Love, Daniel." Nobody else would know those exact words unless they were holding my wedding ring in their hands. I gripped the kitchen counter so hard my fingers cramped while he explained what happened. Emily had walked into his shop that morning asking for quick cash. At first he thought nothing of it, but she became nervous when he asked about the inscription inside the band. Then she accepted the first loan offer he gave her without negotiating. That was what made him suspicious. He said most people argue over family jewelry. Emily just wanted money fast. When he checked the original paperwork still tucked inside the velvet box, he found my contact information attached to the appraisal documents. "I figured a ring with that kind of engraving deserved one phone call before I processed anything permanently," he said quietly. I don't even remember grabbing my purse. I only remember driving across town with tears blurring every traffic light in front of me. My entire body felt hollow, not because of the diamond, because my daughter lied to my face while crying in my kitchen, because she looked me dead in the eyes and promised to protect the last piece of her father I had left. Brighton Pawn sat beside a liquor store on the roughest block downtown. Victor recognized me immediately when I walked inside. His expression alone told me everything before he even reached beneath the counter and carefully placed the velvet box in front of me. My hands shook opening it. Daniel's ring sat under those fluorescent lights, looking small and strangely lifeless without my hand beneath it. Victor explained Emily took a $3,000 emergency loan against the ring. $3,000. 32 years of marriage reduced to overdue bills and desperation. But then Victor hesitated before saying something else. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," he muttered, "but your daughter was crying in the parking lot after she left." That stopped me cold. He told me Emily sat in her car nearly 20 minutes staring at the money envelope before finally driving away. And suddenly the betrayal hurt differently. Not cleaner, not smaller, just sadder. Because for the first time since that phone call began, I realized my daughter might not be heartless. She might simply be drowning. At that point, I honestly thought my family was beyond saving. But what happened the very next morning changed everything. If this story's hitting you emotionally, drop your city or country in the comments, like the video, and subscribe because the truth behind everything was finally about to come out. I sat alone at my kitchen table until sunrise with Daniel's wedding ring resting in the center of my palm and one question tearing through me over and over. Why didn't my daughter just ask me for help? The house felt painfully quiet except for the ticking clock above the stove, and every few minutes I caught myself staring at Daniel's engraving like somehow the answer might appear there. "Forever, Maggie. Love, Daniel." 32 years together reduced to a pawn ticket folded inside my purse. Around 9 the next morning, Emily finally called. Her voice sounded shaky before she even spoke. "Mom, please tell me you're home." I didn't yell. I simply told her to come over. 20 minutes later, she walked through my front door looking completely wrecked. Mascara smeared, hoodie wrinkled, eyes swollen from crying. The second she saw the velvet ring box sitting on the kitchen table, she stopped breathing for a moment. Then came the apology. Real this time, not defensive, not rehearsed. She admitted the debt collectors had started threatening legal action. She confessed she'd been secretly taking out payday loans for nearly a year trying to keep herself afloat after Daniel died, because she spiraled harder than anyone realized. She said after losing her father, spending money became the only thing briefly making her feel in control of anything. "I hated myself the second I walked out of that pawn shop," she whispered. "I sat in my car crying for 20 minutes because I knew I crossed a line I could never uncross." I believed her. That was the worst part. I could hear the shame in every word. But forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. I slowly slid a folder across the table toward her. Inside were documents from my attorney. Emily's hands started shaking before she even opened them. "I removed you as sole beneficiary from my will this morning," I said quietly. Her face collapsed instantly, but before she could speak, I continued. "Not because I stopped loving you. Because your father spent his entire life teaching us that family means responsibility, honesty, and sacrifice. Right now, you don't understand those things anymore." Emily broke down, crying harder than before, but this time she didn't argue, didn't defend herself, didn't blame anyone else. She simply nodded because deep down she knew I was right. Then I picked up Daniel's ring and closed her trembling fingers around the velvet box. "You don't get to inherit this family," I whispered through tears. "You earn your way back into it." 6 months later, Emily got a second job, paid off her payday loans, started grief counseling, and moved into a smaller apartment she could actually afford. And on the first Sunday dinner she came to after paying back every dollar she owed me, she quietly placed the ring back onto my kitchen table and said, "I think Dad would want you to keep this a little longer." That was the moment I realized my daughter finally understood what the ring was actually worth. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments where you listened from tonight. I read more messages than you probably realize. And if you believe family can break, but still heal, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this.